A shadow falls over the opulent drawing room as the glint of an ivory dagger catches the light, its blade whispering secrets of betrayal and death. Welcome to the Ivory Dagger, a fatal secret revealed. Poirot investigates, a tale of mystery that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let the suspense unfold. If you're hooked by this story, hit that subscribe button, because your support means the world to us. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. Picture this. It's a foggy evening in London, the kind where the streets seem alive with whispers and hidden dangers. Our story begins with the legendary detective Hercule Poirot, that brilliant Belgian with his impeccable moustache and razor-sharp mind, receiving an unexpected letter at his cozy apartment on Whitehaven Mansions. The envelope is sealed with a crest of old money, and inside, an invitation from Lady Eleanor Hargrove, a wealthy widow known for her lavish parties and even more lavish scandals. She pleads for Poirot's presence at her country estate, Hargrove Manor, claiming a matter of life and death that only his little grey cells can unravel. Poirot, ever the curious soul, can't resist. After all, what's a detective without a puzzle? As Poirot arrives at the manor, chauffeured through winding lanes lined with ancient oaks, we're introduced to the cast of characters who will drive this twisting plot. There's Lady Eleanor herself, elegant in her pearls but with eyes shadowed by fear. Her nephew, Reginald Hargrove, a charming playboy with a gambling habit that's drained the family coffers. Then comes Miss Clara Beaumont, Eleanor's devoted companion, whose quiet demeanour hides a sharp wit and perhaps a sharper grudge. And don't forget Sir Geoffrey Thorne, a stern businessman and old family friend, whose booming voice masks a history of shady deals. The estate buzzes with servants, each with their own secrets. The loyal butler, Jenkins, who's been with the family for decades, and the young maid, Lily, whose wide eyes suggest she's seen more than she lets on. The evening unfolds with a grand dinner in the manor's gilded dining hall. Crystal chandeliers casting flickering shadows on the walls adorned with portraits of stern ancestors. Conversation flows like the fine wine, but tension simmers beneath the surface. Lady Eleanor hints at a fatal secret tied to an heirloom, an exquisite ivory dagger passed down through generations, rumoured to be cursed. Poirot observes it all, his keen eyes noting the furtive glances and forced laughter. For example, when Reginald excuses himself abruptly after a mention of debts, Poirot jots a mental note. Motive? Or mere coincidence? To make this relatable, think of those family gatherings where old grudges bubble up. Maybe you've experienced a holiday dinner where an uncle's offhand remark reveals a long-buried feud. Here it's amplified to deadly stakes. Practical tip for aspiring sleuths. Always watch body language. A twitch of the hand or averted gaze can reveal more than words. Poirot excels at this, piecing together clues like a master puzzle maker. As the night deepens, a scream pierces the air. Lady Eleanor is found slumped in her study, the ivory dagger plunged into her chest. Blood stains the Persian rug, and the room's French doors sway open to the misty gardens. Poirot rushes in, his composure unbroken, declaring it murder most foul. Who had access? Who benefits? The police arrive, led by the bumbling Inspector Japp. But it's Poirot who takes charge, examining the scene with meticulous care. The dagger's handle wiped clean, a torn scrap of paper clutched in her hand, reading, "The secret dies with me." Wrapping up this opening chapter, we've set the stage for intrigue, with suspects aplenty and a weapon that's more than it seems. But what does that scrap of paper mean, and why was the dagger chosen? Hold tight as we dive deeper in the next chapter, where Poirot begins his interrogations and uncovers the first layer of lies. Chapter 2. Shadows of Suspicion. The air in Hargrove Manor grows thick with unease as dawn breaks over the estate, casting pale light through the heavy drapes of the drawing room. Hercule Poirot, his eyes sharp despite the sleepless night, gathers the household in the grand parlour, where the scent of polished wood and fading roses lingers. The suspects sit in a tense semicircle. Reginald Hargrove fidgeting with his cufflinks. Clara Beaumont, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Sir Geoffrey Thorne, his jaw set like stone. And the servants, Jenkins and Lily, standing stiffly by the door. Inspector Japp hovers nearby, scribbling notes. But it's Poirot who commands the room, his calm voice cutting through the morning chill like a blade. Poirot begins his interrogations with a simple question. Where were you when Lady Eleanor was struck down? Reginald claims he was in the billiard room, nursing a whiskey and his wounded pride after a heated row with his aunt about his debts. Clara says she was in her bedroom, reading poetry by candlelight, though her trembling fingers suggest something unspoken. Sir Geoffrey insists he was in the library, reviewing business papers, but his polished shoes bear traces of garden mud. Jenkins, the butler, swears he was polishing silver in the pantry, while Lily, the maid, admits to sneaking a cigarette on the servants' stairs, her eyes darting nervously to the floor. Each answer is delivered with a mix of defiance and fear, and Poirot's moustache twitches as he senses the lies woven into their words. The detective moves to the study, where the crime scene remains untouched, cordoned off by Japp's men. Poirot kneels by the desk, his gloved fingers tracing the edge of a half-burned letter in the fireplace grate. The charred fragments reveal only a few words: debt, betrayal, blood, but it's enough to spark his curiosity. He notices a faint scratch on the desk, as if something heavy was dragged across it, and a single pearl earring glinting under a chair, unnoticed by the police. Whose earring, and why was it left behind? Poirot pockets it discreetly, his mind already turning over possibilities. The household's routine unravels as whispers of motives spread. Reginald's gambling debts are no secret, and rumours swirl that Lady Eleanor planned to cut him from her will. Clara, though loyal, was overheard arguing with her mistress about a mysterious letter days before. Sir Geoffrey's business ties to the Hargrove estate raise questions. Did he stand to lose if Eleanor exposed some financial misdeed? Even the servants aren't above suspicion. Jenkins's unwavering loyalty might hide a deeper grudge, and Lily's nervous demeanour suggests she knows more than she's telling. Poirot observes their interactions, noting how Clara avoids Reginald's gaze and how Sir Geoffrey's booming voice softens when speaking to Lily. As the chapter closes, Poirot stands by the study's French doors, staring into the misty gardens where the killer likely fled. A groundskeeper reports seeing a cloaked figure slipping through the hedges that night, but the fog obscured their face. Was it one of the household, or an outsider drawn by the dagger's curse? The detective's little grey cells hum with questions, setting the stage for the next layer of secrets to unravel in the investigation ahead. Chapter 3. Unravelling Alibis. The morning sun filters through the tall windows of Hargrove Manor, but it does little to lift the heavy cloud of suspicion hanging over the estate. Hercule Poirot, having spent the early hours pacing the corridors with his precise steps, decides to delve deeper into the alibis provided by the suspects. He starts in the library, a room filled with towering bookshelves and the faint smell of leather-bound volumes, where he requests a private conversation with Reginald Hargrove. The young man enters, his face pale and drawn, circles under his eyes from a night without rest. Poirot gestures for him to sit in a deep armchair by the fireplace, where embers from the previous evening still glow faintly. Reginald shifts uncomfortably as Poirot fixes him with a steady gaze. The detective begins by recounting Reginald's claim of being in the billiard room at the time of the murder, alone with his thoughts and a glass of whiskey. But Poirot presses further, asking about the argument with Lady Eleanor earlier that evening. Reginald admits they quarrelled over his mounting debts, which had reached a staggering sum from nights at the casino in Monte Carlo. He insists he left the dining room in anger, but harmed no one, his voice cracking slightly as he describes how his aunt had threatened to disinherit him completely. Poirot nods thoughtfully, noting the tremor in Reginald's hands, and inquires about the ivory dagger. Had he ever handled it? Reginald denies it vehemently, claiming the family heirloom gave him chills with its supposed curse, a tale of betrayal from centuries past involving a Hargrove ancestor who used it in a duel of honor gone wrong. Shifting his focus, Poirot excuses Reginald and summons Clara Beaumont to the library next. She glides in gracefully, her dark dress rustling softly, and takes the seat with composed elegance. Poirot recalls her statement of reading poetry in her bedroom, but he challenges the timeline, pointing out that a footman had seen her near the study shortly before the scream echoed through the halls. Clara's eyes widen for a moment before she composes herself, explaining she had gone to fetch a shawl from the hall closet as the night had turned chilly. The detective probes into her relationship with Lady Eleanor, learning that Clara had been her companion for over a decade, starting as a young woman fresh from a finishing school in Switzerland. But there were strains, Clara confesses softly. Eleanor could be demanding, and recent whispers of a secret affair involving Clara and a local artist had strained their bond. Poirot's interest peaks at this revelation, wondering if jealousy played a role, but Clara insists her loyalty never wavered. As Clara departs, her footsteps echoing down the marble hall, Poirot turns his attention to Sir Geoffrey Thorne, who storms into the library with his usual bluster, demanding to know when this farce would end so he could return to his business in the city. Poirot calmly invites him to sit, ignoring the outburst, and questions the mud on his shoes from the night before. Sir Geoffrey blusters that he had stepped out for a cigar on the terrace, needing fresh air after the tense dinner, but Poirot reveals he has spoken to the groundskeeper, who mentioned no one on the terrace that evening, only the cloaked figure in the gardens. Sir Geoffrey's face reddens, and he admits to a brief walk in the rose garden to clear his head, but nothing more. The detective then inquires about his financial ties to the Hargrove estate. Rumours of a joint venture in African ivory trade, ironically linked to the dagger's origins. Sir Geoffrey bristles, explaining it was legitimate business. But Lady Eleanor had grown uneasy about ethical concerns and threatened to withdraw her investment, which could ruin him. Poirot files this away, sensing the desperation beneath the man's bravado. With the main suspects interviewed, Poirot moves to the servants' quarters, a stark contrast to the manor's opulence, with plain walls and the smell of starch from laundry. He speaks first with Jenkins, the butler, in the small pantry lined with silverware. Jenkins stands rigidly, his uniform impeccable, as Poirot revisits his alibi of polishing silver. The detective notices a small cut on Jenkins' hand, bandaged hastily, and asks about it. Jenkins claims it from a slipped knife during kitchen duties, but Poirot wonders if it came from handling the dagger. Delving deeper, Jenkins reveals he had served the Hargrove family since boyhood, witnessing generations of secrets, including Lady Eleanor's late husband's mysterious death years ago, ruled an accident but whispered to be suicide over financial ruin. Jenkins' voice lowers as he mentions overhearing Eleanor discuss changing her will recently, perhaps to benefit a distant relative. Poirot's eyes narrow. Could loyalty have turned to resentment if Jenkins felt overlooked? Next, Poirot finds Lily in the scullery, her hands red from scrubbing pots. The young maid looks up with wide, frightened eyes as the detective enters. He gently questions her about the cigarette on the servants' stairs, but Lily stammers that she had heard footsteps in the hall and peeked out, seeing a shadow pass by the study door. Poirot presses for details. The shadow was tall, cloaked, but she couldn't see the face. Tearfully, she admits to a secret. She had been pilfering small items from the manor to send money home to her ailing mother, and Lady Eleanor had discovered it that very day, threatening dismissal. Poirot reassures her, but inside he adds theft as a possible motive, though the dagger seemed an odd choice for a desperate maid. Returning to the study, Poirot examines the scene once more, this time with Inspector Japp at his side. The inspector grumbling about the lack of fingerprints on the dagger. Poirot points to the scratched desk, suggesting a struggle, and retrieves the pearl earring he found earlier, showing it to Jap. It matches Clara's set, but she claims to have lost it weeks ago, stolen perhaps. The half-burned letter in the grate yields more under closer inspection. Using tweezers, Poirot pieces together fragments revealing a blackmail note demanding payment for silence on a fatal secret involving the ivory trade and smuggling. The signature is smudged, but a partial crest hints at Sir Geoffrey's involvement. Jap's eyes widen, but Poirot cautions patience. Clues must align. As afternoon shadows lengthen across the lawns, Poirot wanders the gardens, tracing the path of the cloaked figure. He discovers a torn piece of fabric caught on a thorny bush, dark wool matching Reginald's overcoat. Confronting the nephew in the conservatory amid exotic plants, Reginald admits to sneaking out for a meeting with a creditor, but swears he returned before the murder. Poirot's mind races, connecting dots. Debts, blackmail, lost inheritances, hidden affairs. A sudden rain begins to patter on the glass roof, mirroring the storm brewing in the detective's thoughts. The household gathers for a subdued luncheon in the dining hall. The empty chair at the head, a grim reminder. Whispers fly as Poirot observes from the sidelines. Clara's furtive glance at Sir Geoffrey, Jenkins' steady pour of wine with a bandaged hand, Lily's dropped spoon clattering loudly. Inspector Japp announces plans for formal statements at the local station, heightening the tension. Poirot, however, requests one more evening at the manor, convinced the killer will reveal themselves through a slip. As the chapter draws to a close, Poirot retires to his guest room, a cosy space with velvet curtains and a crackling fire. He sits at a writing desk, jotting notes in his neat script, the pearl earring and fabric scrap before him. The rain intensifies outside, thunder rumbling like an omen. What ties the blackmail to the dagger's curse? And who among them harbours the deadliest grudge? The investigation presses on, leading to revelations that will shake the foundations of Hargrove Manor in the chapters to come. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The rain continues to lash against Hargrove Manor's stone walls as evening descends, casting long shadows through the candle-lit corridors. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the storm, decides to explore the manor's history, convinced that the Ivory Dagger's curse holds a key to the murder. He begins in the portrait gallery, a dimly lit hall lined with oil paintings of stern-faced Hargrove ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him. The detective pauses before a 17th century portrait of Lord Alistair Hargrove, the first to wield the ivory dagger in a duel that ended in betrayal and bloodshed. The family legend, whispered by servants, claims Alistair's opponent cursed the dagger as he died, vowing vengeance on the Hargrove line. Poirot's moustache twitches, superstition perhaps, but history often hides truth in its folds. Seeking more, Poirot requests access to the manor's archives, stored in a dusty attic room cluttered with trunks and leather-bound ledgers. Jenkins, the butler, leads him up creaking stairs, his face impassive, but his bandaged hand catching Poirot's eye again. In the attic, Poirot sifts through yellowed documents, uncovering records of the Hargrove family's wealth, built partly on colonial trade, including ivory from Africa. A ledger from the 1800s mentions a scandal involving Alistair's descendant, who smuggled ivory through illicit channels, using the dagger as a symbol of power in shady deals. Poirot finds a letter, faded but intact, warning of a family secret that could ruin the Hargroves if exposed. The signature is illegible, but the tone mirrors the blackmail note from the study. Could the past be echoing in the present? Leaving the attic, Poirot encounters Lily in the hallway, her apron smudged from cleaning. Her eyes are red as if from crying, and she startles at his approach. Gently, Poirot asks about her knowledge of the manor's history. Lily hesitates, then shares a story her grandmother, a former maid, told her. Decades ago, Lady Eleanor's husband, Lord Charles, died in a hunting accident, or so it was claimed. Rumours among the staff suggested he took his own life after a failed ivory deal with foreign partners, possibly tied to Sir Geoffrey's family. Lily's voice trembles as she admits she overheard Eleanor recently discussing a dangerous truth with a solicitor about the estate's finances. Poirot thanks her, noting her fear, and wonders if her thefts were a desperate attempt to escape a household unravelling under old sins. Next, Poirot seeks out Clara Beaumont in the conservatory, where she tends to orchids under the rain-streaked glass. The detective probes her knowledge of the family's past, mentioning the smuggling scandal. Clara's face tightens, and she admits Eleanor had been researching the dagger's history, uncovering documents that hinted at a cover-up involving Lord Charles's death. Clara reveals Eleanor planned to meet a historian the following week to verify details, but now that meeting will never happen. Poirot notices a locket around Clara's neck, engraved with initials not her own. When asked, she clutches it and says it was a gift from Eleanor, a keepsake from happier times. But her quick glance away raises Poirot's suspicions. Sentiment or something more. In the drawing room, Poirot finds Sir Geoffrey poring over a map of the estate, his brow furrowed. The detective confronts him about the ivory trade connection, citing the ledger's mention of his family's involvement. Sir Geoffrey slams his fist on the table, insisting his father's business was lawful, though he admits Eleanor's recent inquiries into old contracts had stirred tension. He reveals a heated exchange 2 nights ago, where Eleanor accused him of hiding profits from their joint ventures. Poirot presses further, asking about the blackmail note's crest, which resembles Sir Geoffrey's family seal. The businessman pales, claiming he's being framed, and storms out, leaving a crumpled cigar stub on the floor. A brand Poirot recalls from the garden path near the study. As night falls, Poirot joins Inspector Japp in the dining hall, where the household dines in strained silence. Japp shares a new clue. A groundskeeper found a hidden gate in the garden wall, its lock recently oiled, suggesting someone used it to slip in or out on the night of the murder. Poirot's mind races. Could an outsider have entered? Or was it a resident covering their tracks? He observes Reginald, who picks at his food, his eyes darting to the door as if expecting someone. Poirot recalls the torn fabric from Reginald's coat and wonders if he met more than a creditor that night. Before retiring, Poirot revisits the study, now lit by a single lamp. He examines the dagger, still in police custody, noting its intricate carvings of elephants and vines, symbols of the trade that enriched the Hargroves. A faint stain on the blade, missed by Japp's team, catches his eye. Not blood, but ink, suggesting it was used to write something before the fatal strike. Poirot pockets a magnifying glass, planning to analyze it further. As thunder rumbles outside, he senses the manor's secrets are tied to greed and betrayal, rooted in a past that refuses to stay buried. The chapter ends with Poirot standing at the study's French doors, gazing into the stormy night. The cloaked figure, the blackmail note, the dagger's curse, all point to a truth hidden in the family's history. With alibis cracking and motives surfacing, the detective prepares to confront the household together, knowing the killer's mask is slipping. The next chapter will bring a dramatic revelation as Poirot tightens the net around the guilty. Chapter 5. The gathering storm. The storm rages on outside Hargrove Manor, its howling winds rattling the windows as Hercule Poirot gathers the household in the grand drawing room. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the faces of Reginald Hargrove, Clara Beaumont, Sir Geoffrey Thorne, Jenkins, and Lily, all seated in a tense circle on plush velvet chairs. Inspector Japp stands by the door, his notebook ready, while Poirot paces slowly, his polished shoes clicking on the parquet floor. The detective announces his intention to confront inconsistencies in their stories, his voice steady but carrying a weight that silences the room. Tonight, he declares, the truth will begin to surface, and the killer's composure will crack. Poirot starts with Reginald, whose nervous fidgeting has worsened, his fingers twisting a silver cigarette case. The detective produces the torn fabric from the garden hedge, holding it up in the firelight. Reginald's eyes widen as Poirot reveals it matches his overcoat, contradicting his claim of a brief meeting with a creditor. Under pressure, Reginald stammers that he had gone to the stables, not the garden, to check on a horse he hoped to sell to settle debts. But Poirot points out the stables are on the opposite side of the estate, far from the hedge. Reginald slumps, admitting he lied about the creditor but refuses to say more, his face flushed with defiance or fear. Turning to Clara, Poirot holds up the pearl earring found in the study, its mate still adorning her ear. Clara's hand flies to her lobe, and she insists she lost the earring weeks ago, possibly stolen by a servant. But Poirot reveals a maid's testimony that Clara was seen adjusting her earrings in the hall mirror just before dinner. Clara's composure falters, and she confesses she had entered the study to retrieve a book Eleanor promised her, but found her mistress alive and left quickly. Poirot notes the timing. Her visit was moments before the scream, and asks why she omitted this from her alibi. Clara's eyes glisten, but she offers no answer, clutching her locket tightly. Sir Geoffrey is next, his bluster barely masking unease. Poirot confronts him with the cigar stub from the garden, identical to the brand he smokes. Sir Geoffrey claims he tossed it during his walk, but Poirot counters that the stub was fresh, not weathered by hours in the rain. The detective then raises the blackmail note's crest, linking it to Sir Geoffrey's family. The businessman explodes, accusing Poirot of slander, but reveals that Eleanor had threatened to expose his father's role in illegal ivory deals decades ago, which could taint his current business ventures. He insists he argued with her, but left her unharmed, his hands gripping the armrests until his knuckles whiten. Poirot shifts to the servants, starting with Jenkins. The butler's calm demeanour cracks as Poirot questions the cut on his hand, suggesting it came from gripping the dagger's sharp handle. Jenkins repeats his story of a kitchen accident, but Poirot reveals a silver polished cloth found in the pantry, pristine and unused, contradicting his alibi of polishing silver. Jenkins admits he was in the hall near the study, checking doors as part of his duties, but saw nothing unusual. His voice wavers, and Poirot senses a deeper loyalty, or fear, keeping him silent. Lily, trembling under Poirot's gaze, is asked about the shadow she saw near the study. She describes it more vividly now, a tall figure in a hooded cloak, moving swiftly toward the garden. Poirot presses, did she recognize the gate? Lily hesitates, then whispers that it reminded her of Sir Geoffrey's heavy stride, though she can't be sure in the dim light. Sir Geoffrey scoffs, but the room's tension spikes. Poirot then reveals Lily's thefts, confirmed by a ledger of missing trinkets, and asks if Eleanor's threat of dismissal pushed her to violence. Lily sobs, swearing she only stole to help her mother, and collapses into a chair, overwhelmed. With accusations swirling, Poirot unveils a new clue. The ink stain on the dagger, analysed under his magnifying glass, matches the ink from Eleanor's private desk set. This suggests the killer wrote something, perhaps the torn note in her hand, before striking. Poirot theorises the murder was impulsive, sparked by a confrontation over the blackmail note. He announces a reenactment of the night's events tomorrow, asking each person to retrace their steps. Murmurs of protest rise, but Poirot's firm gaze quiets them. Japp, impressed but frustrated, agrees to assist, noting the hidden gate's lock showed no signs of forced entry, hinting at an inside job. As the group disperses, Poirot lingers by the fire, his mind piecing together fragments, the fabric, the earring, the cigar, the ink, the shadow. He notices Clara slip a small key into her pocket as she leaves, unnoticed by others. Outside, the storm intensifies, lightning illuminating the manor's turrets. Poirot senses the killer is growing desperate, their carefully crafted lies unravelling under his scrutiny. The reenactment will force their hand, and the next chapter will bring them closer to the truth or to danger. Chapter 6. The Reenactment. The storm has passed, leaving Hargrove Manor shrouded in a damp mist that clings to its ivy-covered walls. Hercule Poirot stands in the grand hall, his watch ticking precisely as he prepares for the reenactment of the fateful night. The household gathers reluctantly, their faces etched with unease. Reginald, tugging at his collar, Clara, her locket glinting in the morning light, Sir Geoffrey, arms crossed defiantly, Jenkins, his posture rigid, and Lily clutching a handkerchief. Inspector Japp, flanked by 2 constables, ensures order, his skepticism clear as he mutters about Poirot's theatrics. The detective, undeterred, explains that each person will retrace their movements from the evening of the murder, starting from the dinner's end to the moment of the scream, to expose discrepancies in their alibis. The reenactment begins in the dining hall, where chandeliers gleam dully under daylight. Poirot directs the group to take their places as they were post-dinner. Reginald moves first, reenacting his exit to the billiard room. Poirot follows, noting the route passes the study's hall, contradicting Reginald's claim of avoiding it. In the billiard room, Poirot spots a half-empty whiskey decanter, but the glass Reginald described is missing, suggesting he cleaned up evidence or never stayed long. Reginald stammers that he dropped the glass in haste, but Poirot's raised eyebrow signals doubt. Clara is next, gliding toward the hall closet to fetch her shawl, as she claimed. Poirot times her walk, barely a minute to the study's door. He asks her to enter the study, as she admitted visiting for a book. Clara hesitates, then steps inside, pointing to a shelf. Poirot notices her eyes linger on the desk, where the scratched surface gleams. He asks about the small key he saw her pocket last night. Clara blushes, producing it, a key to Eleanor's private drawer, entrusted to her for safekeeping. Opening the drawer, Poirot finds a sealed envelope with "to be opened upon my death" scrawled across it. Japp takes it for evidence, and Clara swears she never touched it, her voice trembling. Sir Geoffrey reenacts his supposed terrace walk, stepping outside with a cigar. Poirot follows, pointing out the terrace's clear view from the dining room windows, where guests would have seen him. Sir Geoffrey grumbles, admitting he ventured farther into the garden, near the hidden gate. Poirot examines the path, finding fresh boot prints, too large for Reginald's, matching Sir Geoffrey's size. The businessman insists they're from an earlier stroll, but Poirot notes the mud's consistency matches the night's rain-soaked ground. Not a dry day. Jenkins recreates his pantry duties, leading Poirot to the servants' wing. The silver polish cloth, still pristine, lies where Poirot found it. Jenkins demonstrates polishing a tray, but his bandaged hand moves awkwardly, as if avoiding pressure. Poirot asks about the hall patrol he mentioned, timing the route. It places Jenkins near the study at the critical moment. The butler insists he saw no one, but his eyes flicker toward the servants' stairs, where Lily claimed to be. Lily's reenactment is fraught with nerves. She climbs the servants' stairs, pausing where she smoked her cigarette. Poirot asks her to point out the exact spot where she saw the cloaked figure. She indicates a shadowed corner near the study's entrance, visible through a crack in the stairwell door. Poirot tests the angle. It's possible to see the study door, but not the figure's face. Lily's description of the cloak's heavy wool aligns with Sir Geoffrey's overcoat, not Reginald's lighter one. She adds a new detail. The figure carried something small, glinting in the lamplight, perhaps a key or blade. Poirot's mind sharpens. Could it be the dagger? With the reenactment complete, Poirot gathers everyone in the study, where the blood-stained rug remains. He reveals the envelope's contents. A letter from Eleanor, detailing her intent to expose a smuggling ring tied to the Ivory Dagger, implicating Sir Geoffrey's father and, indirectly, him. The letter names no killer, but warns of threats against her life. Gasps ripple through the room. Sir Geoffrey's face darkens. Clara clutches her locket, and Reginald drops his cigarette case. Poirot observes their reactions. noting Jenkins' steady gaze and Lily's quiet sob. Japp interrupts, announcing a new discovery. A groundskeeper found a bloodied cloth hidden in the stables, wrapped around a shard of glass. Possibly Reginald's missing whiskey glass. Poirot examines it, noting the blood matches the murder scene's type, though too degraded for identification. The glass shard suggests a struggle, perhaps before the dagger's use. Poirot theorizes the killer entered the study, argued with Eleanor, and struck impulsively, then staged the scene to look premeditated. As the group disperses, Poirot lingers, studying the study's French doors. He notices a faint smudge on the glass. Lipstick, a shade Clara wears. Did she leave through the garden, or is someone planting clues? The mist outside thickens, mirroring the web of deceit tightening around the suspects. Poirot senses the killer's desperation growing, their careful facade crumbling under the weight of his scrutiny. The chapter closes with Poirot in the library, sketching a timeline on a notepad. The letter, the glass, the lipstick, each clue points to a motive rooted in greed or fear of exposure. The detective knows the next confrontation will force a mistake, bringing him closer to unmasking the murderer in the chapters ahead. Chapter 7. The Hidden Truth. The mist lingers over Hargrove Manor, wrapping the estate in a ghostly veil as Hercule Poirot stands in the study, his sharp eyes scanning the room for overlooked details. The morning light filters through the French doors, illuminating the faint lipstick smudge he discovered last night. Determined to unravel its significance, Poirot decides to pursue the clues tying the suspects to the crime scene, focusing on the letter, the bloodied cloth, and the mysterious key. He gathers the household once more, this time in the library, where the air is heavy with the scent of old books and unspoken accusations. The suspects, Reginald, Clara, Sir Geoffrey, Jenkins, and Lily, sit in tense silence, their faces betraying a mix of dread and defiance. Inspector Japp, stationed by the window, watches with growing impatience, eager for a breakthrough. Poirot begins by addressing the lipstick smudge, holding up a handkerchief dusted with the same shade, borrowed from Clara's room with Japp's permission. Clara's face pales, and she insists she never used the French doors, claiming the lipstick could belong to anyone. Perhaps Lily, who uses a similar colour. Lily shakes her head, her voice barely audible as she denies owning such a shade. Poirot notes the discrepancy, but shifts focus to the key Clara produced during the reenactment. He asks her to open Eleanor's private drawer again, this time in front of everyone. With trembling hands, Clara complies, revealing a small journal tucked beneath a stack of letters. The journal, bound in red leather, bears Eleanor's initials and a lock that matches the key. Poirot carefully opens the journal, its pages filled with Eleanor's elegant script. The entries detail her growing suspicion of a renewed smuggling operation linked to the Ivory Dagger, implicating not only Sir Geoffrey's late father, but also a current associate, someone close to the manor. The final entry, dated the day of the murder, mentions a confrontation planned that evening to demand the truth. Poirot reads aloud, "I fear the dagger's curse is no myth, but a greed that poisons us all." The room grows still, and Sir Geoffrey shifts uncomfortably, his eyes darting to the door. Poirot asks if he knew of Eleanor's suspicions, but Sir Geoffrey denies it, his voice strained, insisting his business dealings were above board. Turning to Reginald, Poirot confronts him about the bloodied cloth and glass shard found in the stables. Reginald's jaw tightens, and he admits to breaking a glass in the billiard room during his argument with Eleanor, cutting his hand in the process. He claims he hid the cloth to avoid suspicion, fearing his debts made him an easy target. Poirot points out the cloth was found far from the billiard room, suggesting Reginald ventured closer to the study than he admitted. The young man's defiance crumbles, and he confesses to lingering in the hall, overhearing Eleanor and Clara arguing about a letter, possibly the journal's contents, but swears he left before the scream. Poirot then questions, Jenkins about his proximity to the study during his alleged hall patrol. The butler's composure falters as Poirot reveals a new clue. A polishing cloth found in the study, hidden under a rug, bearing traces of the same ink as the dagger's stain. Jenkins insists he never entered the study that night, but Poirot suggests the cloth was used to wipe the dagger's handle, explaining the lack of fingerprints. Jenkins' bandaged hand trembles, and he admits to handling the dagger days earlier to clean it for Eleanor, but nothing more. His loyalty to the family, he says, is unwavering, yet Poirot senses a flicker of resentment in his eyes, perhaps tied to years of overlooked service. Lily, visibly shaken, is asked about the cloaked figure again. Under Poirot's gentle probing, she recalls a detail. The figure's cloak had a distinctive brass clasp, shaped like a lion's head, unlike any she'd seen on Sir Geoffrey's coat. Poirot files this away, recalling a similar clasp on a cloak in the manor's guest wing, often used by visitors. This raises a new possibility. An outsider, perhaps known to the household, entered through the hidden gate. Japp interrupts, reporting that the gate's lock was oiled with a specific brand used by the manor's staff, narrowing the suspect pool back to the household. As tensions rise, Poirot unveils another discovery, a torn photograph found in the journal, showing Eleanor, a younger Sir Geoffrey, and an unidentified man in a colonial setting, standing beside crates marked with the Hargrove crest. The man's face is scratched out, but the crates hint at the smuggling Eleanor feared. Sir Geoffrey, cornered, admits the man was his cousin, a disgraced trader who vanished after a failed deal with Eleanor's husband. He claims no knowledge of current smuggling, but Poirot senses he's withholding more. The confrontation ends with a sudden disturbance, a loud crash from upstairs. Japp and Poirot rush to the source, finding a broken vase in Clara's room, its shards scattered across the floor. Clara claims she knocked it over in a moment of distress, but Poirot notices a hidden compartment in her dresser, now exposed, containing a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. He doesn't reveal this to the group, instead instructing Japp to secure the room for later inspection. The household disperses, each suspect casting wary glances, as if sensing the noose tightening. Poirot retreats to the garden, where the mist has begun to lift, revealing the manor's sprawling lawns. He examines the hidden gate, finding a faint scratch on its latch, suggesting frequent use. Standing there, he pieces together the clues: the journal's accusations, the lion's head clasp, the torn photograph, and Clara's hidden letters. The murder, he muses, was not just about money or revenge, but a desperate attempt to bury a truth threatening to resurface. As the sun breaks through the clouds, Poirot knows the next step, examining Clara's letters, will bring him closer to the killer's identity. The chapter closes with Poirot walking back to the manor, his cane tapping rhythmically. The household is on edge, their secrets spilling like the vase's shards. The detective's little grey cells hum, sensing a revelation is near, one that will shake the foundations of Hargrove Manor in the chapters to come. Chapter 8. The Letters of Betrayal. The sun climbs higher over Hargrove Manor, its rays piercing the morning mist and casting long shadows across the polished floors of the grand staircase. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of connections, decides to focus on the bundle of letters found in Clara Beaumont's hidden dresser compartment. The air in the manor feels charged, as if the walls themselves hold their breath, awaiting the next revelation. With Inspector Japp's permission, Poirot returns to Clara's room, now guarded by a constable to preserve evidence. The broken vase lies in pieces on the floor, its jagged edges glinting like the fragments of truth Poirot seeks. The detective, his gloved hands steady, retrieves the ribbon-tied bundle from the dresser, noting the faint scent of lavender and the worn edges of the paper, suggesting frequent handling. Back in the library, Poirot spreads the letters on a mahogany table, their yellowed pages illuminated by a brass lamp. The household, Reginald Hargrove, Clara, Sir Geoffrey Thorne, Jenkins and Lily, gathers at Poirot's request, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Japp stands nearby, his pencil poised, as Poirot announces that these letters, penned in Eleanor's hand, may hold the final key to her murder. He begins reading the first, dated a year ago, addressed to Clara, in a tone both intimate and urgent. Eleanor writes of discovering discrepancies in the estate's accounts, hinting at funds siphoned off through a shell company linked to the ivory trade. The letter begs Clara to keep this secret, as exposing it could endanger them both. Clara's eyes glisten, and she admits Eleanor confided in her, trusting her as a sister, but insists she never betrayed that trust. The second letter, written months later, shifts in tone. Eleanor's words are sharp, accusing Clara of meeting someone in secret, possibly the artist rumoured to be her lover. Poirot's gaze locks on Clara, who clutches her locket, her voice breaking as she explains the artist was a friend, nothing more, and Eleanor's paranoia had grown after finding the blackmail note. The letter mentions the ivory dagger, describing it as a symbol of our shame, tying the family's wealth to illicit trade. Poirot recalls the torn photograph from the journal, with its crates and scratched-out face, and asks Clara if she recognized the man. She shakes her head, but her trembling fingers suggest otherwise. Poirot turns to Sir Geoffrey, whose face is a storm of barely contained rage. The next letter references a confrontation Eleanor planned with him, demanding he clarify his role in the shell company. Sir Geoffrey slams his hand on the table, insisting he ended all ties to the ivory trade after his father's disgrace, and Eleanor's accusations were baseless. Poirot counters with the crest on the blackmail note, matching Sir Geoffrey's family seal, and the cigar stub found near the hidden gate. Sir Geoffrey admits to meeting a business associate in the garden that night, not a creditor as Reginald claimed, but swears it was unrelated to Eleanor's death. Poirot notes the lion's head clasp Lily described, asking if Sir Geoffrey owns such a cloak. He denies it, but his eyes flicker toward the guest wing, where Poirot saw the clasp. Reginald, pale and sweating, is questioned about his knowledge of the letters. Poirot reveals a note in the bundle mentioning Eleanor's plan to revise her will, potentially cutting Reginald out entirely. The young man's voice cracks as he admits he knew Eleanor was furious about his debts, but he never saw the letters. Poirot presses, pointing out Reginald's lie about the stables and the bloodied cloth found there. Reginald confesses he hid the cloth after cutting his hand, fearing it would implicate him, but insists he never entered the study. Poirot's moustache twitches. He believes Reginald's fear, but not his innocence. Jenkins, standing stiffly by the door, is next. Poirot asks about his role in Eleanor's financial oversight, as the butler often handled correspondence. Jenkins admits to delivering sealed letters to Eleanor's solicitor, but claims ignorance of their contents. Poirot reveals a final letter, addressed to the solicitor, instructing him to investigate Jenkins' family history, hinting at a long-buried scandal involving his father, a former Hargrove accountant dismissed for fraud. Jenkins' face hardens, and he insists his loyalty to Eleanor was absolute, despite her probing into his past. Poirot notes the ink-stained polishing cloth, suggesting Jenkins handled the dagger to write a note, perhaps the one clutched in Eleanor's hand. Jenkins remains silent, his bandaged hand clenched. Lily, barely able to meet Poirot's gaze, is questioned about her thefts. The letters mention Eleanor's discovery of missing trinkets, and Poirot asks if Lily knew of the smuggling accusations. She shakes her head, tears streaming, and says she only stole to pay for her mother's medicine, never suspecting Eleanor's investigations. Poirot softens, but asks about the cloaked figure's clasp again. Lily recalls seeing a similar clasp in the guest wing, used by a visitor months ago, a man who met Sir Geoffrey late at night. This sparks a murmur, and Sir Geoffrey's jaw tightens, but he offers no explanation. Poirot steps back, surveying the group. The letters paint a picture of a household fractured by secrets, greed, betrayal, and fear of exposure. He announces a visit to the guest wing to inspect the cloak with the lion's head clasp, suspecting it belongs to an outsider tied to the smuggling ring. Japp agrees, dispatching a constable to search the room. As they move, Poirot notices Clara slip a small notebook into her sleeve. Her movements quick, but not quick enough to escape his notice. He says nothing, filing it away for later. In the guest wing, a dusty cloak is found, its brass clasp gleaming with a lion's head design. Japp confirms it matches Lily's description, but no name is attached. Poirot examines the cloak, finding a hidden pocket with a crumpled receipt from a London jeweller, dated a week before the murder, for a custom locket identical to Clara's. The detective's mind races. Was Clara's locket a gift from Eleanor, or a payment for silence? The group returns to the library, where Poirot confronts Clara, who admits the locket came from a man she met through Sir Geoffrey, not Eleanor. She refuses to name him, her voice breaking with fear. As evening falls, the manor grows quiet, the tension palpable. Poirot retreats to his room, spreading the letters and receipt before him. The cloak, the locket, the journal. Each clue points to a conspiracy larger than one killer. He suspects the murderer acted to protect not just themselves, but a network tied to the dagger's dark legacy. The next chapter will bring a daring trap, as Poirot sets the stage to catch the killer in a moment of weakness. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The late afternoon sun casts a golden glow over Hargrove Manor, but the warmth does little to ease the chill of suspicion that permeates its halls. Hercule Poirot, his mind a whirl of calculated moves, decides to set a trap to force the killer's hand. The clues, the lion's head clasp, Clara's locket, the smuggled ivory, and Eleanor's damning letters, point to a web of deceit, but the murderer's identity remains just out of reach. Poirot gathers the household in the drawing room, its velvet curtains drawn back to reveal the misty gardens beyond. Reginald Hargrove slouches in a chair, his cigarette case forgotten. Clara Beaumont sits rigidly, her locket gleaming. Sir Geoffrey Thorne paces, his face flushed. Jenkins stands by the fireplace, his bandaged hands still, and Lily hovers near the door, her eyes darting nervously. Inspector Japp, flanked by his constables, watches Poirot with a mix of curiosity and exasperation, ready to see the detective's plan unfold. Poirot begins with a deliberate air of confidence, announcing that he has uncovered the truth behind Eleanor's murder, but requires one final confirmation. He reveals his plan, a staged meeting tonight in the study, where he will present a forged document, a supposed confession from Eleanor, naming her killer and detailing the smuggling ring. The document, he claims, is locked in a safe in the library, accessible only by a code he alone knows. In truth, no such document exists, but Poirot's sharp eyes scan the room for reactions. Reginald's jaw tightens. Clara's hand grazes her locket. Sir Geoffrey stops pacing. Jenkins' gaze drops to the floor, and Lily gasps softly. Japp, briefed in advance, nods subtly, understanding the ruse. To set the stage, Poirot instructs the household to remain in their rooms after dinner, claiming the police will guard the library to catch anyone attempting to steal the document. He assigns Japp's constables to patrol the corridors, but secretly arranges for them to watch the study instead, suspecting the killer will return to the crime scene. Poirot then visits the library alone, placing a blank envelope in the safe, its lock deliberately left unlatched to tempt the culprit. He sprinkles a faint layer of talc on the floor nearby, invisible in the dim light, to detect footsteps. As night falls, the household dines in strained silence, the clink of silverware echoing in the vast dining hall. Poirot observes subtle cues. Reginald avoids wine, his hands unsteady. Clara excuses herself early, claiming a headache. Sir Geoffrey mutters about returning to London. Jenkins serves with mechanical precision, and Lily drops a plate, her nerves frayed. After dinner, Poirot retires to his room, but instead of resting, he slips into the shadows of the upper hallway, a vantage point overlooking the library and study. Japp joins him, grumbling about the cold, but intrigued by the plan. Hours pass, the manor cloaked in darkness save for the flicker of gas lamps. At midnight, a faint creak breaks the silence, a door opening in the guest wing. Poirot's heart quickens as he spots a figure moving stealthily down the corridor, cloaked in dark wool with a glint of brass at the collar, a lion's head clasp. The figure bypasses the library, heading straight for the study. Poirot signals Japp, and they follow silently, their footsteps muffled on the thick rugs. The figure enters the study, leaving the door ajar, and begins rifling through the desk, searching for something, perhaps the forged confession. Poirot and Japp burst in, startling the figure, who drops a small knife, not the ivory dagger, but a letter opener. The cloak falls back, revealing Clara, her face pale with shock. She stammers that she was looking for Eleanor's journal, fearing it contained secrets that could ruin her. Poirot, his voice calm but firm, points out the talc on her shoes, proving she entered the library first, likely checking the safe before coming to the study. Clara collapses into a chair, sobbing, and confesses to meeting a man, Sir Geoffrey's cousin, the one from the torn photograph, who pressured her to steal documents for him. She swears she didn't kill Eleanor, only argued with her about the locket, a gift from the cousin to ensure her silence. Before Poirot can press further, a shout from Japp draws their attention. A constable has caught another figure lurking near the hidden gate. They rush outside, finding Sir Geoffrey, his coat muddied, holding a satchel. He claims he was retrieving business papers, but Japp finds a forged passport inside, bearing the name of his disgraced cousin. Sir Geoffrey admits to protecting his cousin's return to England, hoping to revive the smuggling ring, but denies murder. Poirot notices the satchel's lining, a scrap of wool matching the garden hedge. Back in the study, Poirot confronts the group, now gathered under Japp's orders. He reveals the trap's success. Clara's search and Sir Geoffrey's flight confirm their involvement in the smuggling. But the killer's motive lies deeper. He produces the letter opener, its blade etched with the same ink as the dagger, suggesting it was used to draft the blackmail note. Poirot theorizes the killer acted in panic, using the dagger after a failed attempt with another weapon. Clara's confession points to Sir Geoffrey's cousin, but Poirot suspects someone closer, someone who knew the study's layout intimately. As the clock strikes 1, Poirot notices Jenkins slip toward the door, his bandaged hand clutching a keyring. The detective calls him back, revealing a final clue. A servant's log showing Jenkins entered the study hours before the murder, supposedly to clean, but left a hidden note in Eleanor's desk, a warning to stop her investigation. Jenkins' face crumples, and he admits to writing the note to protect the family's honor, but insists he loved Eleanor like a daughter. Poirot's eyes narrow. The bandage hides not a cut, but a burn from handling the dagger's hot wax seal during a desperate act. The chapter closes with Poirot standing by the study's French doors, the mist swirling outside. Clara's tears, Sir Geoffrey's satchel, and Jenkins' burn form a puzzle nearing completion. The killer is among them, their desperation exposed by the trap. The final revelation looms as Poirot prepares to unveil the murderer in the dramatic conclusion ahead. Chapter 10. The Fatal Secret Revealed. The dawn breaks over Hargrove Manor, its pale light filtering through the heavy drapes of the grand drawing room, where Hercule Poirot has summoned the household for the final reckoning. The air is thick with anticipation, the scent of polished wood mingling with the faint tang of fear. Reginald Hargrove slumps in a corner, his cigarette case abandoned. Clara Beaumont grips her locket, her eyes red from sleeplessness. Sir Geoffrey Thorne stands rigid, his satchel confiscated by Inspector Japp. Jenkins, the butler, maintains his stoic facade, though his bandaged hand trembles slightly. And Lily, the maid, hovers near the door, her face pale. Japp and his constables guard the exits, their presence a silent warning as Poirot steps forward, his voice calm but commanding, ready to unveil the murderer of Lady Eleanor Hargrove. Poirot begins by recounting the clues: the ivory dagger, its ink-stained blade, the blackmail note with Sir Geoffrey's crest, the torn photograph, Clara's locket, the lion's head clasp, the bloodied cloth, and Jenkins' burn. Each piece, he explains, points to a motive rooted in the manor's dark legacy of smuggling and betrayal. He turns to the forged document trap, which exposed Clara's search and Sir Geoffrey's attempted flight, but notes that the killer's desperation went beyond greed. The ivory dagger, a symbol of the Hargrove family's tainted wealth, was chosen deliberately, not just as a weapon, but as a message. Addressing Clara first, Poirot reveals the truth about her locket. Confirmed by the jeweller's receipt, it was a bribe from Sir Geoffrey's cousin, Victor Thorne, to secure her silence about his return to England. Clara sobs, admitting she met Victor in secret, pressured to steal Eleanor's journal to protect the smuggling ring. But Poirot clears her of murder, noting her presence in the study was to retrieve the journal, not to kill, as her lipstick smudge on the French doors suggests she fled in panic after hearing the scream. Next, Poirot confronts Sir Geoffrey, whose satchel held a forged passport for Victor, proving he facilitated his cousin's return to revive the illicit ivory trade. The lion's head clasp on the cloak, found in the guest wing, belonged to Victor, who used the hidden gate to enter the manor. Sir Geoffrey confesses to arranging the meeting in the garden, hoping to secure funds to save his failing business, but insists he was outside when Eleanor died. Poirot agrees, pointing out the cigar stub's fresh condition places him in the garden, not the study. At the critical moment, Reginald's turn comes, his face ashen as Poirot revisits the bloodied cloth and glass shard. The young man admits to breaking the glass in a drunken rage after Eleanor threatened to disinherit him, hiding the cloth to avoid suspicion. But Poirot notes the stable's distance from the study and the lack of blood on Reginald's coat, ruling him out as the killer. His lies stemmed from fear, not guilt, though his debts made him a convenient suspect. Poirot then turns to Lily, whose thefts and sighting of the cloaked figure raised suspicions. Her description of the lion's head clasp implicated Victor, but Poirot reveals she was on the servants' stairs, too far to strike the fatal blow. Her tears and confessions about stealing were genuine, driven by desperation for her mother, not murderous intent. Poirot's gentle tone reassures her, but his eyes shift to the final suspect. Jenkins, the loyal butler, stands under Poirot's piercing gaze. The detective unveils the decisive clue. The burn on Jenkins' hand, not a cut, came from hot wax used to seal a note. The torn scrap in Eleanor's hand, reading, "The secret dies with me." Poirot reveals the note was written with the dagger's ink, and the polishing cloth, stained with the same ink, was hidden by Jenkins to cover his tracks. The butler's alibi of cleaning silver was false, as the pristine cloth proved, and his presence near the study placed him at the scene. Poirot recounts the journal's mention of Jenkins' father, a disgraced accountant whose fraud Eleanor uncovered years ago, shaming the family. When Eleanor began probing Jenkins' loyalty, fearing he was leaking information to Victor, she confronted him in the study that night. Poirot reconstructs the murder. Jenkins, enraged by Eleanor's accusations and her threat to expose his family's past, argued with her. In a moment of fury, he grabbed the letter opener, but when it failed to subdue her, he seized the ivory dagger from the desk, striking her impulsively. The note, written in haste, was his attempt to stage a suicide, but he fled through the French doors, leaving the lipstick smudge, stolen from Clara's room to frame her. The burn came from sealing the note with wax, a detail only the killer would overlook. Jenkins breaks, his stoic mask crumbling, and confesses he killed Eleanor to protect his family's honor, believing her obsession with the smuggling scandal would destroy them all. Japp's constables restrain him as he collapses, sobbing. The room falls silent, the weight of truth settling over the household. Poirot explains that Victor's return and the smuggling ring were catalysts, but Jenkins' personal betrayal drove the fatal blow. The Ivory Dagger's curse, he muses, was not supernatural, but the greed and shame it symbolized. Japp orders Jenkins' arrest, and the household disperses, their faces etched with relief and sorrow. Clara weeps for Eleanor. Reginald vows to reform. Sir Geoffrey faces ruin, and Lily finds solace in forgiveness. As Poirot steps into the garden, the mist finally clears, revealing the manor's ancient oaks. He reflects on the little grey cells that unravelled the puzzle, his cane tapping rhythmically. The case is closed, but the dagger's shadow lingers, a reminder of secrets that cut deeper than steel. If you've been gripped by this tale, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us. Join us for more mysteries, and comment below, who did you suspect? The next adventure awaits.